Recently, Stalker messaged me asking for aim help. I've been on the same team with him twice, and honestly, I've always felt a little guilty because during the season, it's almost impossible to give one-on-one coaching to every player while prepping scrims, meetings, and matches. But this time, my coaching partner Shrugger and I finally sat down and broke it down properly. This video is interesting for two reasons. First, most of you are probably wondering, what can you even coach a world-class player like Stalker? Second, I'm going to give you a few takeaways from his sessions that you can apply immediately, even if your heart's stuck gold. If you're below that, well, turn on your monitor first and come back. Just kidding. Let's dive in. So to start, Stalker obviously is an amazing aimer. He asked us for help with his skin aim, but even there, he already had high peaks in some games very comparable to the best skin players in the world. In this example, Stalker has crazy reactive aim, snapping his crosshair back to the target super fast. So whenever the target is moving, he almost puts his crosshair on target like an aimbot. For flex DPS like Tracer and Genji, this is fantastic. But what if I said that sometimes his elite flex DPS aim was actually hurting his hitscan aim? Now let's take a look at this example. This is a long-range hitscan scenario, and every time enemy Ashe dodges, Stalker keeps adjusting his aim immediately, trying to catch their movement. If this was closer range, where hitboxes are bigger, or if this was flex DPS where precision is less important and quick reactive tracking matters more, it could have looked like another moment where he flexes his insane aim, almost looking like an aimbot. Reactive tracking helps even for hitscan, but Stalker was over-relying on reactive tracking, when he could have been having more emphasis on reading and predicting enemy target, focusing more on the precision. Now let's take a look at this example of Quartz as comparison. So as you can see, enemy Juno is moving right and left, just like the enemy Ashe that Stalker was fighting against. But Quartz, rather than reacting to every single strafe of the enemy team, he read and predicts enemy target's movement, and more so, let the enemy team walk back into his crosshair, more like wait and click aim style. And in this example as well, rather than reading and predicting enemy movement and making one decisive shot, you can see he's almost adjusting his aim too much, reacting too much to target's movement. So rather than constantly tracking, he can really benefit a lot from reading the enemy movement and taking one decisive shot around his click timing. And this is another great example highlighting his tendency. If you take a look, he takes a shot immediately as soon as he sees a Baptiste. But these non-tracking, click timing heroes, precision and hitting that one shot matters more. So he could be benefiting a lot more by reading the enemy movement for like a quarter second or just a half a second. But it kind of seems like his hand is reacting faster than his brain. This is clip from MN3, and first he knows enemy Ana wants to go back to cover on our left side. So instead of overly reacting to Ana moving to our right, he waits her to walk back into his crosshair. When his prediction is wrong, he makes a quick, decisive flick at his shot timing. Quartz and MN3 are using a bit of a tracking here. It's not like they're not moving their crosshair at all, but it's more of a slower and smoother tracking instead of just rapid, fast, reactive tracking we've seen from Stalker. They're not overly reacting to every little movement of the target. So this style, when it comes to hitscan, it really helps your aim with stability, and you're more likely to be aware of your crosshair position before you take the shot. Whereas if you're constantly moving your crosshair around super fast, it's much harder to tell exactly where your crosshair is. And his excellent tracking skill wasn't the only thing that he was over-relying on. It was also the case for his movement aim. Some of you may have watched my How to Aim Like a Genius Tracer video, where I used Prophet as an example. But obviously, Stalker is one of the Tracer genius, and he has excellent movement aim as Tracer. He's really used to lining up his aim with this movement, and he's really freaking good at it. But when we look at this clip, he should be peeking wider to get LOS on the enemy Ashe. But he's mainly using his movement as an aim assist, which might make sense more often for flex DPS. But just like this, we noticed in some scenarios, his movement aim was hurting his skin aim. So in this clip, MN3 is stopping his movement whenever he's taking a shot and using a bit of mouse. So Quartz, Lip, MN3 mostly just try to simplify their movement so it doesn't interrupt their precisioning. Here, Stalker starts with the headshot on the enemy Ashe, so he has a clear advantage. But rather than simplifying his movement, he still uses his movement to dodge a lot, which can be fine with Tracer, a tracking gun hero that has huge spread. But when we want the most precision with our aim, like hitscan aim, we want to simplify the movement. And now this is a similar scenario of MN3. So MN3 hits the first headshot on the enemy Ashe. So now he's just simplifying his movement, just walking straight, stopping when he's taking a shot as much as they can. So as you can see, there are different ideal aiming techniques for different aiming scenarios. And while Stalker might be one of the best aimers in the world when it comes to flex DPS, that same aim can often hurt him in some hitscan situations. Obviously, we're showing you some cherry-picked scenarios, but the takeaway for viewers is that different aim techniques are needed for each aiming scenario. And you also have different strengths and weaknesses when it comes to aim. Sure, most of you know tracking should be used for tracking gun heroes like Zarya and Soldier, but people don't really think about how their close-range tracking is, or what particular part of my aim is weak. For example, my co-writer has been playing various first-person shooter games for over 20 years. But even though he plays Soldier, the fact that he was particularly weak at close-range tracking never occurred to him. But if you can pinpoint specific problems in your aim, rather than just saying, oh, my aim is bad or my tracking is really weak, it's much easier to improve them. So you can think about what are some strengths and weaknesses in your aim, and what aim skill is most required for your hero that you play a lot. Or if you have a particular scenario that you tend to struggle a lot with your aim, like long-range aim, or when enemy team is dodging AD severely, or close-range and 180 aims. Knowing what your strengths and weakness is, and knowing what skill is required for your hero is the first takeaway. Now for the second takeaway, let's take a look at this example. Stalker does a quick flick on the enemy, but if you take a closer look, his speed actually gets faster as it gets closer to the target. So his flick speed is like slow, then fast. And as you can see, we've noticed that he was doing this slow, then fast flick motion quite consistently. But when we look at Quartz, his aim speed is more so fast than slow for a similar reason that we mentioned previously. If your aim is jittery or if your crosshair is moving too fast, it's much harder to control, which means it's much harder to do precise aim. A lot of good hitscan players reduce their aim distance with their first positional flick with very fast speed. Then they take way more time on the second step doing the final adjustment on their shot. You guys might be familiar with this concept if you watched my 10 years of aim knowledge video. This is what we call two-step aim motion. In Stalker's case, he was definitely doing some two-step motion as his scan, but it wasn't consistent. Because he intuitively knew about this aim motion, but because he didn't conceptualize this concept, he was sometimes doing it, but way less consistent. We thought this might be one of the reasons for having high highs, but also having lower lows. So the second takeaway is it's not about whether you do it or not, it's how much you do it. It's about the level of mastery you have over it. Most pro players know a lot of concepts and they are already pretty elite on those skills. But compared to the best in the world, some parts of their skill is pretty good but not world class. Or they could be simply inconsistent like we saw with Stalker's two-step aim motion. I even coached pro players on something as mundane as how to use cover. Obviously, every pro player knows how to use cover, but back in Apex days when WizardHyeong was the best flexhopper player, his cover usage was on a different level. If my memory is still correct, I remember he was hiding 1.5 times more frequently compared to most flexhopper players at the time. He was spending about 25% more time behind cover. And in the same way, when we take a look at Quartz aim, even simple things like crosshair placement and pre-aim, Quartz was doing it at a different level. He was doing it much more consistently and doing it much faster. And that's everything for today, and these aren't everything we went over with Stalker. We had a few coaching sessions covering different topics, but I hope this video gives you some sneak peek into what it's like to coach a world-class player, and also giving you a few aim takeaways you can use. Thanks for watching.